All right, Thursday night, time for our Las Vegas Triathlon Club member spotlight, and this is gonna be a fun spotlight. I'm John Mercer, president of Las Vegas Tri Club, and I've got co-host Bob Gamble. Hey, Bob, how's it going?
It's going fine. Thank you, John. Good to
Good.
be
And so
here.
Bob is having camera problems, so he may disappear, but we'll still have audio. But hopefully we'll make it for 30 minutes with the camera. That's awesome. So this is going to be fun because Will and I are roughly the same age, and we started triathlon at almost the same time. And it's going to be really neat to hear about the experiences that Will has had over this past, what has it been now, Will? 30 years, I guess?
Roughly,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's amazing. So this is going to be a lot of fun. So I'll turn it over to Bob for the official introduction.
All right. Thanks a lot, John. I appreciate it. And thanks so much for being on with us tonight, Will. And I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah.
And folks, for the folks out there, this is going to be interesting because Will has got not only an interesting, but a unique background.
Mhm.
Um, Being a helicopter pilot, having flown in the Army for 22 years. And, that's part of his background. The part that relates to triathlon that I'm interested in, he was a Cat 3 cyclist. And that means you're fast on a bike for sure. Um,
Yeah, thanks for your service.
yeah,
Thank
absolutely.
you. Yeah, it
We
was the best
appreciate
thing
it.
I ever did. Uh,
And like John said, Will's been doing triathlons for about 30 years. And I asked him, how many have you done? He goes, oh, I don't know, around 100 or so. And that's that's quite a few triathlons. So the man has some experience. And also he's done everything, up sprints through full Ironman. And so we're going to talk about that. But Will, before we get started, first of all, thanks so much for being here.
Thank
And
you.
I'm just curious, explain your profile picture with the bomber on it. Is that something you worked on or
Yeah,
flew on or what?
so when I was 18 and I graduated high school, I joined the Air National Guard, and I was enlisted in, that's the aircraft. It's a A7D that was kind of a post Vietnam fighter bomber, and I was just a weekend warrior, going to college and working there on the weekend and doing my thing. That's how I got my start in the military.
Hmm.
And that's cool. Everybody that we've interviewed has got some sort of a unique background. And here we have an ex-military fighter, helicopter pilot.
Mhm.
So how did you get into triathlon? What made you get into triathlon? Especially you were a cyclist before you
Yeah,
started
I
triathlon.
actually I ran cross country in high school, and there was like there was, I don't know, 13 men on the team, and I was number 12 or 13 on the team. I wasn't a very good one. I wasn't very good on the team. Um, I was a shitty
I
runner.
I and a lot of us can
I,
relate. Don't worry about
I'm
that.
still a shitty runner, but I still keep trying. But so then when I got into college, I discovered cycling and I loved it. Um, and I progressed to the point where I was moving into being a Cat 3, but I just couldn't dedicate the time to being just a cyclist. And plus, I was my degrees in exercise and sports science, and I just loved all
Oh, I didn't
endurance
know
sports
that.
is what I loved. And I had swam as a young kid on a team, but not, for years I hadn't swam, and I'm like, I discovered triathlon, and it was just like the best thing I was like, this is the coolest thing in the world. And so that's
What
how
was it about it that made it so cool?
just the three disciplines. And back in the 80s, it was still kind of a new thing. And if people, you know, for lack of a better term, people thought you were extreme if you were doing triathlons. So um, that kind of thing just drew me into the sport. So I loved cycling. I loved swimming. Got me back into swimming, and just the three disciplines of, and I just thought it built a better, a more well-rounded athlete than just being a cyclist or whatever. And I had dreams, although they never came to fruition, of making it as a pro, obviously. But and even after my first year out of college, I was like, well, I'll give this a shot. And I could swim and cycle with those guys, and be in the top 10. But as soon as we got off the bike, they just ran away from me. So
Mhm.
it was, you know, I was just like, this is,
I'm
you
sorry, but
know,
I'm
this is
feeling
great.
like you're my kindred spirit here. Same thing is like,
You know, and
I
plus,
count the people going by me on the run.
you know, and I mean, I dreamed of doing that, but in reality, I mean, all I ever wanted to be was a military pilot. So I ended up living out my dream for the most
That's
part
cool.
there. Yeah.
And you're still flying.
Yes, I'm still flying.
So I'm curious from a cycling background that you did in college. Curious how does your cycling back then compare to the cycling that you do now?
Um, I mean, because of where I'm at in my life, I can put a lot more volume in.
Hmm.
Um, I think and I actually made a lot of gains this year again, or I should say, I came back to making a lot of gains. I'm not nearly at the point where I was, you know, when I was that age. But I'm pretty happy with where I'm at right now. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. I like two things that you said. One was the fact, you know, as far as why you like triathlon is you love to cycle and you love to swim, and you're doing this because it's fun and you like doing all three. And then the second thing is how you're right. It makes a well-rounded athlete. You're more rounded now than when you were just purely a cyclist or
Yeah.
a swimmer.
Yeah.
So you got into triathlon back in the glory days of the sport building, and yeah, being in the Southwest. I mean, you had all the California races, and obviously even in Arizona. Talk about starting triathlon back in the mid '80s.
Yeah. So, you know, back then it was kind of a fledgling sport, and it started off when it was just Ironman, and then, you know, finally they started making these shorter races that, you know, anyone could do. And, you know, I got into it. I lived in Tucson. A lot of athletes would come to Tucson in the wintertime to train. And, you know, if you're from that era, there was a guy, Jimmy Riccatello.
Oh yeah.
He was very prominent in that time frame. You know, and I knew him, and, you know, he was like the star, you know, in that town in Tucson. I mean, he still lives there. And,
Hmm.
but you know, and he had a lot of his friends were the big names in the sport, so they would all come to town. And you know, Tucson was like at that time was, and it still is. A lot of athletes still go there to live there and go and train there.
Hmm.
But in the wintertime, they would come there because it was just a spectacular place to, especially ride
Hmm.
and run. There's not a lot of water, obviously. Some great pools, but
And
great. So the cycling is just phenomenal in Tucson.
Jimmy he started triathlon when Bud Light Triathlon Series got started.
Right.
And you know, I remember doing, you know, as far as how old I am, I did some races with Jimmy, not, you know, with him. He was a pro.
Right. Right.
But
I know what you
same,
mean. Yeah. You were in the same. You were in the same race with him.
yeah, exactly. But it was fun. And it's interesting that Bud Light was so far ahead of its time in
Right.
making shorter races. And you know what? Where you were racing, was duathlon bigger than triathlon for a while? It was when I
It
started.
kept trying to make inroads, but triathlon was still the thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess in my mind it was, but I think what was it, Brad Kearns? I mean, I think
Yeah,
he was
Brad
like,
Kearns, right?
yeah,
Yep.
yeah, he was a huge biathlete.
Hmm. Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, do you remember your first race and what that was like?
Um, yeah, I think my first race was like I think it was it was a pool race, you know,
Mhm.
and then you got out and um, you know, yeah, I mean, it's funny you bring that because I just now am like having flashbacks of doing that race. Because it was at the University of Arizona, it was in the student union pool.
Yeah.
You had to swim laps in the pool, and then you got out and you had to like go down these stairs and get on your bike and go on this course. And you know, yeah, so that was pretty cool. And yeah, so I remember my first race. And then there used to be a big race in Arizona. It was called Fountain Mountain.
Mountain
Mm.
Hills.
Yeah, Fountain Hills.
Yeah.
And I actually, that was the first race I got like third place, I think, or something like that. You know, that's where visions of grandeur came
Yeah.
to my mind about the sport. And
Yeah,
I still have a little trophy from it. So it's, you know, it was like a tray that was made into like a trophy. So, you know, I still have that thing, and reminds me of, you know, that was pretty much when I first got into the sport, and how much, when I discovered how much fun it was.
So
Yeah.
how
did you,
how soon after the Arizona pool swim tryout did you do that one?
That was probably within a year or the same
Okay.
year, possibly.
Hmm.
Yeah, you know, back, you know, there was no internet then, so, you know, you heard from friends or the back of Triathlete magazine when the next races were going to be. So,
picked up a flyer at the bike shop?
yeah, exactly.
Oh, I love that. I love that history to it. So, how did you train for? How did you prepare for that first one? And then after you did that first one, which sounds like just sort of this unique race, they just sort of put it together. What did you do after that to get ready for this next race that you did really
Uh,
well?
you know, back then, it was just like volume, volume, volume.
Yeah.
Just do as much as you possibly can.
And do it hard
And
too.
yeah, and you know, and so one of the reasons I got out of cycling is because I didn't have all this time to dedicate to just cycling. What, you know, because I was going to college, I was working, but, you know, I had an hour or two here or an hour or two there, so I could swim. You know, I could swim while I was at school, and I could ride on the weekend, and then I could run whenever I could squeeze a run in. And, you know, back then it was just like, to me, you just kind of winged it. You know,
Yeah.
you're like, you try to do all three as much, you know, because, you know, you look back on these guys and they're like, well, you know, a swimmer swims, you know, 2 to 3 miles a day. A cyclist swim or rides 300 miles a week, and you know, a runner does 50, 60 miles a week. You know, but there's no way I could keep that up. But back then, that's what those guys were. You know, the guys that were trying. If you wanted to be a triathlete, you had to triple the load of everything.
Yeah. 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 And
That
there
was
was
that was
really,
the age of paranoia too.
Right.
Everybody was saying, you know,
Yeah.
and it was because, am I doing enough running?
Right.
I'm running now. Am I doing enough cycling? Am I doing hard? And then there was so much competition. Remember Mike Pigg
Yeah.
and Jimmy Riccatello and Scott Molina and you know those folks. They were all competing with each other
Right.
to see who did the most volume.
Mhm.
So I'm
So
sorry, John.
no, no, no. So tell us about that race that you got third in early on. Then what was that was the lake swim and
Yeah, it was a lake swim. I think Bartle Lake or Bartlett Lake or something like that.
mhm.
And then you swim from there and you ride into Fountain Hills, and then the run course in there. And uh, back then, there was, it was just, you drank water back then. There was no like, hydration and goo and gel and all that stuff. And you grabbed a
You
banana
used
or
a
an orange slice on the run or something like that. Um,
defizzed Coke, right?
yeah, yeah. So
That
it was
was
just,
the
it
drink.
was go as hard as you can for as long as you can. I didn't know anything about pacing or,
No.
it was just balls to the wall till you fell apart. You know.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, you're so right. I mean that, and there was really no good coaching back then in terms
No.
of how to build this. It was a lot of just discovery. But yet you've been in the sport for 36 years. So talk a little bit about how you've gone from, that where you're just trying to throw it together. I mean, a lot of people got injured back then because of that.
Yeah.
But you've been able to sustain over this long period of time. Was it a pretty consistent 30
No.
plus years?
So after I joined the Army, I kind of still rode, and I would swim and run a little bit, but mainly just cycle, just to stay in shape and everything. And um, when I so my after I finished flight school, I went to North Carolina, and I did I don't know, one or two little short races there. Nothing serious, just it popped up, so let's go do this. And then after that, went to Korea for a year and didn't do much but drink a lot there.
Where
And,
were you in North Carolina?
Fayetteville at Fort Bragg.
Okay, so you
Yeah.
didn't do any races around Charlotte.
No, I went. I was down in Wilmington where I did the races, and then from Korea, I went to Hawaii, and that's when I really got back into the sport again. And you know, that was the late 90s. And you know, things were kind of progressed. Actually, you know, the sport was kind of trickling off there for a while. And then, but there, you know, in Hawaii, there's literally almost every weekend there's a triathlon or something going on. So I got back into the sport there, and then after leaving there, went back to Alabama to teach flight school, and just kind of, and so I was just up the north of the Panhandle, and so there's some Panama City, and that Panama City race was there. And that was like my first attempt at a half. It was, I don't think it was even called a half Ironman. Then I think it was called a long distance or a half race. But I got somebody pulled out in front of me on the bike about halfway through, and I crashed, and I ended up like fracturing my scapula.
Oh no.
So then after I left there, I ended up going to special operations for about 10 years, and I just kind of was again back into cycling and swimming, and you know, I think maybe I did 1 or 2 races during that time period. And then after I retired, I was just like, I really wanted to get back into the sport again.
When was that? When did you retire, Will?
I retired in February of 2013.
Okay.
And then I moved here in 2014. And you know, after I got out, I really just wanted to get back into triathlon, and that's when coaching started to become a thing. So, you know, and there were like training programs out there and things like that. So kind of got into
and heart rate monitors. It's like
heart rate monitors. You know? And around that's when, you know, and then around 2014 or 15, discovered, you know, the whole power meter thing, and managing power and output and your effort. And then, so after I got out, that's when I started getting online coaching. And so the one thing about, you know, I always have been a crappy runner. I was a extreme heel striker, and, you know, I never, you know, I was just like, well, you know, and you read things and you're like, well, some people are you know, they run on their toes. Some people are heel strikers. But it just seemed like it would run from injury to injury to injury.
That's right.
And about 5 or 6 years ago, I went to this CrossFit endurance camp where they taught the pros thing. And I was just like, this could really change my running, because it's all about cadence, and it's about maintaining a high cadence. And if you listen to what they're saying, and it takes forever because, you know, I ran my whole life one way, and to change, and I'm still evolving. I mean, I have been pretty much injury free for the past 3 or 4 years.
Because of that running method?
Yeah, because of that running, because
No heel strike.
It forces you to become a midfoot or a toe striker. So like my heel spur situation went away, my plantar fasciitis went away.
Your shin splints?
Yeah, everything went away. I'm still not fast, but I'm able to log a lot more miles, become a lot better runner. And that's, you know, so that's.
I bet you're going to get faster too, though. You got that base of the cadence, and you know, there's no doubt.
Yeah, I mean, you know, so the year, let me see, no, it was actually last year I did Santa Cruz, and that was literally my best half I've ever had. It was like a 5:48 or something like that. So that was and then I was, you know, everybody saw my post on Cozumel, and I was on track to probably do a sub 5:40 there, but I completely so I ended up not getting there. My travel plans got all screwed up. I didn't get there till Saturday afternoon. I was running around like a chicken with my head cut off, trying to get into the race, my bike and everything, get everything staged and everything. And the night before, I thought I had packed all my nutrition in my helmet bag, in my bike bag and everything. And literally just before I left the room in the morning, I grabbed 3 extra gels. I'm like, I'll take these just in case. And I get to the race and I have zero nutrition with me.
Oh, no.
So
Jeez.
yeah, so I was like, well, I got these three. And I had taken something before I left the room too, but so I was just like, well, I'm gonna, and I was told would have goo on the course, but
Mhm.
they didn't have goo on the course. They had hydration on the course is all they had.
Ah,
And, as you know, if you get behind in hydration or calories, you're done.
yeah.
It's, but I had a phenomenal swim. I had a great bike. I even held back a little bit on the bike because I'm like, I know I don't have it. And
I don't have any
I
fuel.
was going to run out of gas on the run, but I was just like, well, we'll see what happens.
Oh,
And, I got off the bike and I had 2 good miles and it was just downhill from there. And the last 4 miles, I was pretty much just walking, and I would jog occasionally, but I started getting cramps. So I'm just like, well, it is what it is. So
well,
Your time was still pretty good though. if
yeah,
you
it was
think-
okay, but a 2:48 or 53 half marathon that's pretty pathetic. Yeah,
I love it because, I mean, you're so experienced, but yet these things still happen,
yeah,
and yet you saw it through,
yeah.
and you still, knew how to get to that finish line. I'm curious, thinking back on all your races, which was the most memorable race?
Um, I'll tell you that probably the Santa Cruz race was the most because it went off without a hitch.
Yeah.
I mean, everything, I didn't bonk. I had a good ride. I had a good swim. The run went, and back then I was still developing this run, trying to learn how to run again.
Mhm.
And I ran, I think I had like a 2:10 or 2:12
Wow.
half,
Oh, good.
which was that was like pretty good for me. So, that is probably my most memorable race. I mean, but I did a half, when I was in Hawaii on the Big Island.
Hmm.
That was fun. I have memories of that. Races that don't exist anymore. Branson. I did Branson. Things like that.
Oh, I
But
love it.
I like doing sprints a lot because you can just the training effect of a sprint of getting on to do all 3 sports, but the transition and
Mm.
you can just go as hard. Nutrition doesn't really play too much of a role. It's more like hydration in that race,
Wow.
and you can just go as hard as you want till you blow up, and still have a pretty fun race.
I love it.
It is
'Cause
fun.
Did not regret it the next day.
that's what I was going to ask you is what is your favorite distance? It sounds like you're being drawn to the 70.3s, but
Yeah.
it's really cool to hear that the sprint is really, true to you, to the way that you approach it.
No, I like the sprint because you can experience all 3 sports and you can learn from it. And I think you can learn from that and transfer it into the half, what you've learned there, but when you get to the half, you can't go 100%. You have to pace yourself and you have to get off the bike and be able to run.
Yeah.
You can experiment in the sprints,
Yeah, absolutely.
try different nutrition and stuff. That's a great attitude. As far as like, yeah, I'm going to do a sprint, and I'm going to enjoy it, and I'm going to learn.
Yeah.
I like that.
Well, again, I'm just drawn to this idea that you've been doing this sport for well over 30 years, and we have a lot of people who are brand new to the sport right now. What would you tell someone who's starting out in the sport how to make it sustainable over a long period of time?
It's just make it. I always like to think of the fact that I get to work out. It's not that I have to work out.
Mm.
And I like that there's 3 sports plus I can do cross training.
Mhm.
So I'm not just now pounding the bike every day or swimming lanes and swimming laps in the pool every day. It's a constant mix up of using all 3 sports plus going to the gym. and, you know, doing other things, because I think all those things help each other, you know, if you do them the right way.
You sound like you would like the mountain bike also.
I do like mountain bike, yeah. And I actually I was thinking this year, I'm like, it just seems like it's been a long year, and I didn't race this whole year up until last week, and I did the couple of the club events, but I just haven't had the time to find a race and go to a race and everything like that. So, but this last weekend was just like, you know, it's just like you do something and you just fall in love with the sport again. I was just, you know, I was like, I know I talked to John a couple of weeks, the last race, I was like, you know what, I don't know if I'm going to do any more halves anymore. I think I might just do sprints and go find some Grand Fondos or stuff like that, and some of these mountain bike races, which I still want to do. But after this weekend, I'm just like, I love the 70.3. It is so, it's a complete challenge, but it doesn't beat the crap out of you if you approach it the right way.
And it's not a full-time job.
Right.
Training.
Yeah.
So what is your next 70.3? You're doing IMAS 70.3, right?
Yeah, Arizona, 70.
Arizona?
And then I'm going to Cabo in November to do the 70.3 there. And I've considered the
Indian Wells.
Yeah, Indian Wells, but I don't know. I'll probably be ready for a break by then. So
I guess.
I've never done 3 races this close to. I usually do 2 to 3 races a year, and I spread them out by 3 months or so. But I hadn't raced all year, and I saw these 3 races, and when I first signed up, I'm like, oh, I got a whole month between all races. But that's not the way it's working out. I got about 2 to 3 weeks between each race. So right now it's, let me just finish all 3. And then the first goal is finish all 3. The second goal is how well can I do in all 3?
I love it. So, you know, again, I love this longevity in the sport, because obviously you and I are parallel here. What have been maybe some of the biggest changes you've seen, either in how a race is organized and happens, or even in just the sport overall?
Well, you know, there was a time there when it was just kind of, everything was haphazard with it, and they're really well planned now. You know, even in this race, some of the support was, especially on the run. I mean, I finished mid-pack, and they're running out of water on the run, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, there's 1,000 people behind me, and they're not going to have any water for these people. You know, and so I'm just like, as long as the sport's running around, and as long as Ironman's been around, they've got to understand the logistics to what's, especially when it's a hot, humid race.
Now, when were you talking about this happening?
So in Cozumel, like I said, I was pretty much in the top 50%. So that means there's 50% of the people behind me, and there was water stations out on the run that they had no water.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And or they were bringing water, but it was hot water or you know, it wasn't cold water or anything like that. So that was on my last leg, because it's a 2-lap race. So run. So on my last leg in, they were running out of water. So I was just like, man,
There'll be a lot of hurting people behind you.
right. But you know, as far as the whole how to train, coaching, you know, you don't have to train 30 hours a week to have a great performance. You know, you can do 10 to 15 hours a week and have a satisfactory performance in a half. And, you know, if you're doing sprints or you're doing Olympics, 10 or 15 hours a week, you can blow it out of the water. Yeah.
Oh, I love it. And I think what you mentioned before sort of brought back some memories, where you said you had to look in the back of Triathlete magazine for races, and you had to wait, you know, a month to see the results. You know,
Right.
now after a race, you go pump in your number and you get a printout.
I used to have a folder with all of them. I think I had a folder with all my races in it, so I could, you know, relive my glory days.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, and pictures back then, you'd get them in the mail in a little a little,
Um,
passport size photo and,
Take your pick.
oh, that's great. Well,
yeah,
I
but,
love it.
technology has just helped the sport evolve with, pedals, power meters,
Hmm.
hydration, nutrition. None of that stuff was around in the 80s, in the
Mhm.
90s.
Yeah.
Um,
So again, just tagging on to something John said is we do have a whole bunch of brand new folks who are just getting started. Is there anything else you would offer to them?
no,
Any advice?
I think there's a lot of programs out there that you can get and you can modify them to yours. An online coach, and I've been through 4 coaches, I think 3 or 4 coaches. I've got one now, and I liked them all. There was things that I think after a while, sometimes coaches get comfortable with you and they kind of don't push you, or they just kind of ride the wave with you. And so I've got a coach now that I really like, and look around, try a coach for a while, try a couple of coaches. Maybe you found one that you liked, so go back to that guy or girl, whoever it is.
Yeah.
Everybody has good points. So
Yeah, and
pick the ones that match you. Now, are you doing online, sir?
Yeah, I am doing. I have a coach with
Online coaching?
Carmichael Training. That's who I use, CTS.
Mhm.
And what was that again? I'm sorry.
Carmichael Training Systems.
Okay.
Yeah, it's through, and then having a Training Peaks account, so you can go on there and see and then of course Strava, being on Strava and
Yeah.
seeing your friends. I have friends all over the world, that are
Yeah.
on Strava, so I can follow them.
Cool.
I
All
love
these
it.
pros are on Strava, so you can follow them.
That's cool. It's changed so much since, when we started
Yeah.
back in '89, so.
All right, so we're pretty much out of time, but I'm curious if you were able to toe the start line against your younger self, would you have a chance with all your
Uh,
experience and or
Good
what
question.
distance
Probably.
would you have a chance at?
Probably. My younger self would probably beat me, but I'd probably have a chance. I don't know. You know what? It would depend on the distance.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
love it. Yeah,
Yeah, you're smarter now. You know
I'm a
a
lot
whole bunch
smarter
that he
now.
didn't.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's right.
I love it. Well, this has been so much fun, and it's great to sort of reminisce and think back on in the day.
Right.
Really neat that you have been in the sport for such a long period of time, and you're still, talking about enjoying it, and that's so important. And I really hope people hear that's how you sustain this, lifestyle in the sport. Is just you got to enjoy
Have
the
fun.
training, enjoy
Well,
the.
there's a couple of times in my life when I didn't have the time to do the sport. So because of the Army and especially the 10 years when I was in combat, just didn't have time to dedicate to the sport. So once I retired, I just fell back in love with the sport again.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah,
And that's a good message, is that it's okay to step away because the sport will always be here.
yeah, it's always going to be
It
there.
will change, but it is here. And so if you can't, if you have to step away, that's fine. Well,
Yeah,
this has been great.
you made some really good points tonight. I really appreciate
Thanks.
talking as far as the as John mentioned, the longevity, and you don't have to hammer it so hard on high volume all the time and still enjoy it and still improve with using your head. These were really good points. I appreciate that.
Well, thanks so much. Thanks so much for being part of the club. It's
Sure.
always great to see you at a race. I love it, and keep going.
Yeah. Thank you.
We'll
All
talk to you
right.
later. Thanks again.
Thanks,
All right.
everyone.